Okay, so I'm here with Kelly today. Kelly, we're going to go ahead and get started if that's okay. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say you're feeling today, or right now, even?
1 to 10. I would say probably like a 3 or a 4.
Okay. And 1 meaning that 1 is not so good and
Yes.
10 is really good. Okay, so 3 or 4. And how about just thinking back to this week since we last met? How would you rate your week on a scale of 1 to 10?
I mean, this week was a little harder. So I would say probably that same, like a 3 or a 4.
3 or a 4, okay. And then without going into too much detail right now, could you touch briefly on maybe something that happened this week or an experience you had this week that is causing you to rate yourself at a 3 or 4?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you know about the situation with Cole. And so we have mutual friends, and I was going to talk to one of my friends and tell them, but I just couldn't get the nerve to tell them and be honest about it.
So it sounds like that was probably took a lot of energy to even think about in the first place, and then to end up deciding that you didn't want to. I'm sure there were probably some thoughts and feelings after the fact that were hard.
Yeah, I mean, I've been, really struggling with if I want to tell someone, just because we have so many friends in common.
Okay.
It's been really hard, just because I've been really just kind of pulling away, because it's hard that we have, we have to have that relationship there because our friends are still there. And I don't want that. I want to be as far away from it as possible. So, I really thought, should I tell one of my friends? And what's hard is one of my good girlfriends is actually dating his good friend. So, but I kind of decided, we've been friends since we were, in 5th grade, and then I just couldn't do it.
So you still have a lot of connections through those mutual friends, and so it sounds like it or not, you're still maybe having to protect yourself a little bit from coming across him. Has that been a difficult thing?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's like you can't go to the old places that I used to enjoy going to, or I even feel weird, when they ask to go and, my friend will ask me to go and get lunch. It's like, well, I know that we're going to go to the Chipotle where he goes to.
Yeah.
So, or,
sure.
It's by his house. It's just, I can't go.
And it's something that probably allows it to constantly be in your brain as you're going to those places, or it's bringing it back up each time.
Oh, I think about it all the time. Yeah. I mean, anytime I get in the car and go to the gas station or anything, I mean, it's constant.
Okay. Now, just to kind of touch back on what we discussed last week, I know you said that you were even having some trouble eating and sleeping at night, having some nightmares and things like that. And so it sounds like what you're talking about today, maybe you're feeling a little isolated, or, as you're not able to connect with friends and you're having to kind of protect yourself. But at the same time, it sounds like you thought about reaching out to someone this week.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still having all those same issues. My sleep is just almost non-existent, really. I'll fall asleep and wake up constantly throughout the night. My eating hasn't gotten any better. I mean, I basically don't eat breakfast. I'll eat a tiny, tiny snack for lunch, and then basically force myself to have at least something for dinner. But yeah, and then I just feel been pulling away and kind of isolating myself, and just want to be alone. I kind of feel like.
Yeah. So I think from what I'm hearing, I'd like us to focus a little bit in this session on your specific experience this week with thinking through whether or not to share your experience with a friend, and maybe touch on some of those thoughts and feelings surrounding that experience for you this week, and then maybe even do a little bit of homework this week about that as well. Does that sound okay with you? Okay. So thinking back to that, moment as you were thinking of calling your friend, what were some of the thoughts that you were having right before that, or leading up to that?
I've been feeling alone. Just trying to connect with someone was kind of, I think, where my head was at. I struggle with wanting to be alone, but then also wanting that connection, to have someone, and to have someone know what happened. It's hard for me to watch her act, keep talking to him like nothing happened and not knowing the real person that he is. So I kind of decided that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to call her. And then I kind of started to, wonder, well, what will she think about me? Are we not going to be friends anymore? What if she takes his side? What if she doesn't believe me? All those types of thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are some really, those are some really common thoughts. A lot of people who've experienced something like what you experienced will feel a sense of confusion, or just wondering, what would it look like for me to tell someone? How are they going to respond? So that's a really common experience. So you talked a little bit about your thoughts surrounding that experience, and you mentioned worrying what your friend might say, worrying how she might respond. And could you talk a little bit about maybe the emotions that you would associate with those thoughts, or just even how you were feeling around that time?
Anxious. I was feeling, a lot of anxiety. I was embarrassed too. I feel like, ashamed of myself, like maybe I could have done something. Some of those are the type of feelings that are really sticking with me.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. What made you decide to not tell your friend? Was there something that stuck out to you that you said, no, I'm not going to do this?
Just kind of the what ifs, I think. What if she doesn't believe me? I think is kind of the main one that really has stuck out. And then I kind of thought, what might be the repercussions of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And then even as you're sitting here today, or just after deciding, no, I'm not going to call her on that day, how have you been feeling since then? Or what thoughts have you had since then about it?
I'm still struggling with, do I tell her or do I not tell her?
Okay.
I just feel like that's kind of the constant thing that I'm dealing with is I feel like I really need to weigh out, should I tell her or should I not tell her?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think her response might be? Could we just think about that for a second? If you play it out in your mind of the scenario of you picking up the phone, probably do a little small talk, and then you actually decide to tell her, what do you think might happen if you did that?
So I always, when I think about it, I think about two scenarios. One either goes really well, and she supports me, and she believes me, or there's always, the thought that she's not going to believe me, or she's going to say, well, you've told me before that, you guys went on a date, and, I've seen you guys together in the group. You guys totally like each other. How much were you drinking? Did you drink? We know you definitely have a history of maybe drinking a little bit too much. So, that's what scares me, is I don't want to have to go through that.
Okay. So what I'm hearing, and part of what we do in these CBT sessions, is we work together to try and identify some thoughts that you're having about the situation that might not be helpful to getting to where you would like to be. And so one thing that I hear, and you can tell me if you agree with this, is that maybe part of it is that you're doing a little bit of self-blaming in terms of wondering or fearing that others might feel that you are somehow responsible for the situation. Is that something that I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely self-blame all the time.
Okay. So I think one other one that I heard too is kind of this question of should, like maybe looking back and saying, should I have done something different? Will they think that I should have done something different in this situation? And kind of asking that question of second guessing your response in that moment during that encounter with that person. And so I think those are two thoughts that I want to point out, is just the self-blaming as well as kind of those should statements that we might want to talk through and work on just identifying and becoming aware of, and seeing how maybe trying to replace those with some positive thoughts about yourself, and reminding yourself that it wasn't your fault, that there are situations like that are very traumatic, where your instinct takes over, and that's okay, right? That your body kind of just does what it has to do, and that's how you did protect yourself in those moments, right? So what do you think about that?
I mean, I know that the self-blaming is something I do all day, every day, I feel like. I know that's definitely a thought pattern that I know I need to change, and I know that it's there. It's just, doing it. And then the should, I never really thought about that. But now that you've kind of pointed it out, geez, never thought about it that way.
And I think those should statements play into the self-blame. Like, if I should have done this, and then I wouldn't have, those should statements kind of feed into the self-blame, I think, sometimes. So, yeah. So I think what we'll do, if it's okay, as we wrap up our session here, is I'm going to send you home with this thought record. And so this is just an opportunity for you throughout this week to kind of become a little bit more aware of your thoughts in general, and specifically as they relate to some of those self-blaming patterns that you're finding yourself in, and some of those kind of should statements. And so this is pretty self-explanatory, but you'll just jot down where you were, the emotion or feeling you were having in that moment this coming week, and then any automatic thoughts that you recognize yourself having, as well as any evidence that either supports the thought or does not support the thought. And then I'd love for you to just bring this back next week, if that's okay.
Okay.
So I'll hand that to you. And then just before we go, I always want to give you an opportunity to reflect just on the session that we had today. Maybe you can just, if you want to identify one thing that stuck out to you or that was helpful to you, as well as anything that you say, I really would not want to do that again in a session.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the should statements, I'd never thought about it like I had said, and to have it pointed out like that, I think was helpful, because that'll definitely come into play here, and I think that this will help kind of recognize when they're coming up, and how we can work on that. And same with the self-blame, because I feel like I really need to, you know you shouldn't do it, but it's just kind of hard to get over that hump. But this will be helpful, I think. So kind of pointing out those things. I like that. It's helpful.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for coming in today, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Yeah.